Hi, I'm John with Orange ModWorks, and from Taiwan, this is part 2 of electronic mods for the Nerf Recon. Before we get started, let's take a look out the window. It's like a sea of CNC mills and injection mold manufacturers. It's pretty impressive. The first step is going to be to attach the positive and negative wires to your battery contacts. Now remember, those two sections of battery contact that were not attached to the others is where you're going to attach your positive and negative. It really doesn't matter which wire color you choose, but for this video I'm going to be using black for negative and red for positive. Alright, while you're waiting for your soldering iron to heat up, go ahead and use the Dremel to drill a series of holes through the dividers where the locks used to be and right next to your first lead. This keeps the wire out of the way of moving parts like the bolt sled and provides a more direct path to the area where the switch will be mounted. Alright, when you're done soldering, you should have something that looks like this. During the soldering process, depending on what epoxy you used, it may become detached, but that's no problem. You can just finish your soldering and go ahead and reattach it. And up at the front here, you're going to want to do the same thing like with the red wire and clear a path for the wire to go up to where you're going to mount your laser, or light, or whatever you choose to wire in. Alright, once you have your wires taken care of, the next step is to attach the pressure switch. This particular switch is from a Nerf barricade, and we're going to mount it behind where the trigger spring goes. So you're going to have to epoxy that in place and cut a ramp into your trigger, which will allow you to actuate the switch. Like so. Alright, once you have the switch mounted, it should look something like this. With the ramp, you can see the ramp cut in the trigger there, and the button just butting up against the trigger. And when you pull it should be just as easy as that. You should feel almost no resistance. And the next step is to take your positive wire and wire it to the switch. You're going to want a lead. You're going to only use the bottom two leads. You'll notice that there's 3 on the switch. You use the top 2 if you want the switch to be on in its up position. Use the bottom 2 if you want the switch to be on in its down position, which is what we're going to be using. Okay, so you have one wire attaching to one of these leads, and then making sure that your solder does not touch the second lead, you have another wire attached to the second lead. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. Okay, when you're done attaching the wires to the switch, you should have something that looks like this. I ran out of red wire, so I spliced in a section of black wire here, but at the business end, it's still red positive, black negative. Go ahead and run those wires down behind the switch along the top of the trigger guard. You can go back through the holes if you want, and then around. And I'm going to run this red wire through the hole here at the front, so we'll have our 2 leads right up here where the laser is going to be mounted. Alright, I ended up drilling an extra hole right here to run that positive wire behind the batteries in order to keep it out of the way of the bolt sled here, and then up through the front. Now the next step is to get your laser diode, which looks like this. You want to salvage this entire piece from your cheap laser pointer, and to do that you're going to have to take your rotary cutting wheel and cut very shallowly along the body of the laser pointer, careful not to damage the internals. And then after that you're going to peel it open and pop out the inside, and I'll do that real quick. Okay, after you've made the cut along the body of your laser pointer and you peel it open, it should look something like this. Notice, look how thin the sidewall is, so you have to be very careful not to cut into the diode itself. However, nicking it a little bit is okay, but you do not want to damage this silver lining out here. And also, I recommend that you hold on to your laser diode with some pliers or gloves, because it does get very, very hot while you're cutting it. And the next step is to get rid of this switch. If you look carefully, you'll see there's a switch and a gap, and two little beads of solder right here between the switch and the laser body. You want to save the electronic component that is sandwiched between those two beads of solder. So just cut the switch off as close to the switch as possible, just cut right through the circuit board there. And when you're done, you should have something that looks like this. What you're going to end up doing is soldering your negative lead right here on the first bead of solder, because you want the current to flow through this electronic component into the laser diode. The positive lead you're going to have to tape or glue onto this silver out here, because this is actually some sort of conductive paint, and that's where your lead gets attached directly to the plastic body of the laser pointer. And down here, this shiny piece of what looks like circuit board is actually the laser diode. The laser diode is a flat piece of material that's inside there. Without the body, it doesn't function correctly, which is why we need to save it. Alright, at this point you should be able to take your laser diode, wire it up, epoxy putty it in place, drill a hole through your blaster so you can see it, and you'll be good to go. But I'm going to try and take it a step further and make it so you can adjust it for elevation. So to do that, I've taken this metal tube and heated it and pressed it through the plastic here over the screw hole so it fits down in there, like so. And I've taken the laser diode and on the underside scooped it with the rotary cutter so it will sit on top of that metal tube like so. I'm going to epoxy that in place and see how it works. Okay, I have the diode epoxied in place on top of the tube and it trimmed down, and after some extra grinding with the Dremel, managed to get it to fit. Now the red wire is duct taped to the outer body of the laser diode in contact with this conductive paint. The black wire is soldered on top of one of the pre-existing solder points that I talked about a second ago, and everything seems to be in order. The friction hold here is quite stiff, so it does allow for minute changes in elevation, and it holds itself in place quite nicely. Mounting the pressure switch behind the trigger allows you to pull the trigger halfway to turn the laser on to get your sight picture, and then by completing the trigger pull, you fire the blaster. This works especially well with the metal trigger catches, but also works with the stock trigger catches. So, laser on, fire. Laser on, fire. It has taken some extra grinding on the opposite side in order to get my adjustment piece to fit, and the screw hole is no longer good, but it does fit and goes together quite nicely. You can see it. Alright, so I hope this video opens up some possibilities for you guys in your electronic modding, and happy modding!